Hey students, welcome to eLearning Week 8, and we'll be looking at the Enlightenment this week. On the practice and quiz questions, you're going to find several quotes instead of just one. So I want to put this video together to kind of go over all these different quotes. So let's go ahead and begin. First quote you're going to see, let's see if we can get to, there we go, is by John Locke. And John Locke, this quote is going to deal with knowledge. And he says, "Let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all characters, without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished? Whence has it all the materials of reason and knowledge? To this I answer, in one word, from experience. Our observation, employed either about external sensible objects or about the internal operations of our minds, perceived and reflected on by ourselves, is that which supplies our understanding with all the materials of thinking." So this is by John Locke from the Essay Concerning Human Understanding. So what is this in this paragraph or this quote? What does he say about knowledge at birth? And what you'll notice is up here in this quote, he says our knowledge at birth is like white paper. So think of a piece of white copy paper. There's nothing on it. So he says we are born without any knowledge and we have no idea. So knowledge at birth, basically he calls it a blank slate, which is tabula rasa. Probably pronouncing that wrong, but tabula rasa. All right, second question, how do humans gain this knowledge? So how do we get knowledge? If you'll notice, he asked that same question. Well, how does it become furnished? How does knowledge become furnished? Whence do all these materials of reason and knowledge come to us? How do we get this? If we're born with a blank slate at birth, how do we get knowledge? And what he says is, it's from experience. We get our knowledge from our experiences in our lives. So we get it through experience. That's where we're going to gain knowledge. So what does he call experiences? What are these experiences that lead to knowledge? It's what he's going to say is through observations, either by observing our external sensible object using our senses, hearing, taste, smell, etc., or reflected inside our minds because we're thinking beings. That's how we're going to get these experiences. So it's going to come through observations through our senses, taste, touch, feel, etc., in our thinking in our own mind. That is how we are going to gain these experiences. Okay, Diderot. Diderot put together an encyclopedia. And basically it had a large impact on Enlightenment society. And this just comes from Britannicus school. So the encyclopedia was a showcase for representatives of the new schools of thought in all the branches of intellectual activity. So this is why it's coming in the Enlightenment. The work was notable for its attitude of tolerance, and tolerance means accepting others, and liberalism, and also for its innovative coverage of the trades and mechanical arts. In its skepticism, where people had a hard time with it, its emphasis on scientific determination, and its criticism of the abuses perpetuated by contemporary legal, judicial, and clerical institutions. So he says there were some abuses by the church, by the judges, by the legal system. The encyclopedia had widespread influence as an expression of progressive thought and served in effect as an intellectual prologue to the French Revolution. So this encyclopedia had an effect on society. Well, what was that effect that Diderot had? And basically he supported toleration in religion and society. So have tolerance in religion and society. But he also attacked religious superstitions. And he called for social change and legal change and political change. Okay, Adam Smith. He dealt with economics, or basically how do we earn money. And so this is his quote. "As every individual therefore endeavors, as much as he can, both to employ his capital in support of domestic industry," and domestic would be here at home, "and so to direct that industry that is produce may be of the greatest value. Every individual necessarily labors to render the annual revenue of the society as great as he can. He generally indeed neither intends to promote the public interest or knows how much he is promoting it. By preferring the support domestic to that of foreign, that means other countries' industries, he intends by his own security and by directing that industry in such a manner as it produces may be of greatest value. He intends only its own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end to which was no part of his intention. So this is by Adam Smith in his book, The Wealth of Nations, in 1776. So the question is, what is the individual's economic role in society? What is your job in producing wealth in society? And he talks about employing your capital. Every individual has to have labor and annual revenue, and you need to support the domestic industry here at home more than the foreign. So your job is to support domestic industry versus foreign, and producing supports a greater society, producing things. Well, how does a person increase the public wealth? Say the greater public, the rest of society. And what he says is that if you take care of yourself first and your own gain, it's going to lead to greater society. So first you start in your own, and then it's going to lead to greater society. So by going after and pursuing own gain and interest, it's going to increase wealth in general. So you, as an individual, create wealth, and in turn it creates public wealth. Jean-Jacques Rousseau talked about a social contract. To renounce one's liberty is to renounce one's quality as a man, the rights and also the duties of humanity. For him who renounces everything, there is no possible compensation. Such a renunciation is incompatible with man's nature. For to take away all freedom from his will is to take away all morality from his actions. In short, a convention which stipulates absolute authority on one side and unlimited obedience on the other is simply vain and contradictory. It is not clear that we are under no obligations whatsoever towards a man from whom we have the right to demand everything. And does not this single condition without equivalent, without exchange, involve the nullify of the act? For what right would my slave have against me, since all he has belongs to me? His rights being mine, this right of me against myself is a meaningless phrase. And this was by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He wrote The Social Contract in 1762. So what he says, what is his ideas about liberty? And really what he says, if you give up your liberty, you're giving up basically everything. You're giving up one's quality as a human. You're giving up the rights and duties of being a human. So do not give up your liberty, because it is against human nature, it is immoral, and do not give in to absolute authority. How should society be governed? And he talks about what he says is a social contract between you and the government. The social contract is between the governed, the citizens, and the government. All right, Eugene Weber. What's the role of a monarch? The services of a monarch must provide for his people, consisted in the maintenance of the laws, a strict execution of justice, and defending the state against its enemies. It is the duty of this magistrate to pay attention to agriculture. It should be his care that provisions for the nation shall be in abundance, and that commerce and industry should be encouraged. He is a perpetual sentinel who must watch the acts and the conduct of the enemies of the state. If he be the first general, the first minister of the realm, it is not that he should remain the shadow of authority, but that he should fulfill the duties of such titles. He is only the first servant of the state. This is from the Western tradition, Eugene Weber, 1972. So what does he mean by the word sentinel, being a perpetual or all the time sentinel? A sentinel should watch and guard against the acts and conduct of the enemies. That's that role of the monarch, a perpetual sentinel. All right, Mary Wollstonecraft. She wrote about the rights of women in 1792. My own sex, and she means her own gender, I hope will excuse me if I treat them like rational creatures. She's treating other women like herself as rational, as thinking creatures. Remember, this is year 1792. instead of flattering their fascinating graces and viewing them as if they were in a state of perpetual childhood, unable to stand alone. I earnestly wish to point out in what true dignity and human happiness consists. I wish to persuade women to endeavor to acquire strength, both of mind and body, and to convince them that the soft phrases, susceptibility of heart, delicacy of sentiment, and refinement of taste are almost synonymous with epithets of weakness, and that those beings who are only the objects of pity and that kind of love, which has been termed its sister, will soon become objects of content. And again, this was written in 1792 by Mary Wollstonecraft. So what does she say is the role of women in society? She says women in society need to acquire strength, both of mind and body, that they need to be equal to men. So as acquire strength of mind through education, men will respect women with strength and rationality, the ability to think. Being delicate and susceptible leads to contempt. Why does she argue for women's rights? She says the Enlightenment teaches that an ideal of reason and women do not need to obey men. Rights should be equal for both men and women. And what does she think of when women are treated as soft phrases, susceptibility of heart, delicacy of sentiment, and refinement of taste? She says when women are treated in this way, it's going to show weakness. These are epithets of weakness. That's it for the quote. So hopefully you can use this as you go over the quiz and you go over the practice questions. Good luck.